Welcome back, everybody, to the next session, which is focused on reworking the network edge for AI. A few people still picking up the coffees from the great coffee cart we have here in the room in Windsor. But we're going to get stuck into this session. We have an online streaming audience here, as we have done throughout the 2 days of DSP Leaders World Forum. So telcos have invested an awful lot of money in the past few years in edge computing. The numbers vary depending on where they come from, but we're talking about billions. And they're looking for new revenue streams. But in general, utilization rates remain very low. Some put it as low as below 20%. And the promised applications have failed to achieve commercial scale. At the same time, hyperscalers are building competing infrastructure with superior developer ecosystems. So how do network operators transform their edge infrastructure from allegedly underutilized assets into profit-generating platforms? And of course, that's what all service providers are looking for. So let's meet our panelists. I'm going to ask them to briefly introduce themselves, starting at the far end. I mean, you might as well have just stayed up here for the coffee break, but please introduce yourself.
I wanted to get myself a coffee. So my name is Fahim Sabir. I work within Colt, within our AI and platforms group, mainly on the platform side, and I'm responsible for Colt's digital platform.
Okay, Fahim, thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Slawek Stawiarski, and I'm responsible for Telco AI network solutions at Intel.
Asif.
Hi, good morning. My name is Asif Khan. I work as a distinguished architect, and my focus is really looking at building enterprise solutions, end-to-end enterprise solutions for our customers.
Okay, great. Thanks. Now, Asif is our co-host, so I'm going to start by asking him a question that to help set the scene, because we want to talk here about how operators can transform the edge infrastructure into profit-generating platforms. And to be able to do that, we need to know what it is that the people who might actually pay for the applications and services, what they want, what they're asking for, what their needs are. So if we can start there, you know, what are the current requests, demands from the enterprise sector right now in terms of the services that can be delivered by communications and digital service providers?
I think if we look, there's plenty of industry verticals we can look at, but I think most of our focus has been around manufacturing, with the convergence of IT and OT, and Industry 4.0. I think we are doing more around that and deployment of edge computing in those cases. And we're seeing an uptick in the use of AI and computer vision models. But the challenge that you've got is the buying cycles within the manufacturing, because it's slow moving once you build a plant, etc., to run that and function it for the next 20 years. So but what we are seeing is definitely an uptick within the manufacturing space and the deployment of edge technologies there.
Okay, what are they asking you to do to help them with this?
It's more around connectivity and connecting that edge essentially into the cloud. So before that, you want insights and a lot of your compute to be offloaded at that edge for computer vision applications, for example, in which factories require cameras, etc., and safety and so forth. So all of that stuff is offloaded to that edge, and then the insights can be pumped into the cloud rather than trying to push that in. So predominantly, we are looking at end-to-end connectivity, but we're working with our partners. We are not going to turn around and obviously manufacture and build out edges, etc. But we will work with our partners to deploy them. And I think with us, our focus is on the end-to-end orchestration, because we're the best people that can actually bring that together, rather than trying to invest in complete edge or compete with cloud infrastructure. Essentially, the world is moving more away from just simply a single cloud into a distributed computing model. And because of that, we're seeing an uptick in that space. But these are large enterprise customers. They're not coming direct. You're not seeing a lot of sales around these kinds of areas. But the focus is predominantly the large enterprises who are focused on innovation, who've got large teams, who we can actually work with to look at those types of things.
Okay. And when you're talking there about the edge compute, you're talking about their edge compute within their network boundaries that you are helping them with, is that right?
Exactly. We call it the enterprise edge before the network edge comes in, or our edge. So essentially, when you look at those kinds of areas in a distributed compute model, you can look at, for example, HP. They have their Green Lake, in which you can then deploy managed cloud, managed edge technologies, and deploy AI edge inferencing stuff within the edge. So we're looking at the complete ecosystem, and it's a matter of working with your partners and orchestrating that end to end.
Okay. Fahim, how much does this sound like what you're hearing from the market as well, and the conversations you're having with enterprises?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty well aligned. I mean, there's a slightly different perspective that I'd like to offer. I mean, ultimately, from our point of view, enterprises are looking for three things. So, first of all, reliable and diverse connectivity. They need to be able to connect to wherever they want to connect to, and they need to do it in a way that's completely reliable. They are looking for security, right? Because, I mean, that's a huge issue. The threat landscape is growing exponentially, and they need to manage that. And the third thing is, we're in a increasingly more regulated environment because of various reasons, geopolitical boundaries and the such like. So, things like, sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought. The whole area of being able to say control network traffic, where it actually goes, and what boundaries it actually traverses is also another really, really important topic. And then basically what you have is another dimension when it comes to this thing. So firstly there is we still see a large number of enterprises that want managed solutions. Effectively, they want to offload their connectivity problem to us. They want us to look after it. They want us to help them in that area. But what we're also seeing as well, and it's a trend where we're seeing slow growth, but growth nevertheless, is the requirement for consumption. So what we see is we've got more traditional enterprises, and then what we have is what I would describe as cloud-native enterprises. And cloud-native enterprises are people or organizations that are so in tune with operating the way that clouds actually operate that they actually are starting to demand the same experience from their network services as well. And as a result, this to us is where edge really comes to the forefront, because like Asif was saying, the orchestration element starts to become really, really powerful when combined with edge, and also with a digital experience that kind of overlays that allows people to do stuff quickly, and without us having to go out and truck roll and install new devices and the such like. So that's kind of where we are seeing kind of the growth of the edge.
Okay. And Slawek, I don't want to leave you out of this part of the conversation, because you have customers that are building edge compute and obviously have had for a long time. So what are you seeing from your customer base, and is that changing right now?
Yeah, absolutely. As gentlemen here mentioned, I think that business to business is basically the primary, let's say, source of use cases where we see that companies are deploying. And from that perspective, manufacturing, security, retail, mining, are those core, let's say, businesses where we see the edge is utilized, and we see the uptick. There's not much of, I would say, business to customer, B2C, at this stage, which is hopefully is going to be picking up, with all this deployments that telcos have. But it requires the ecosystem as well, right? The application ecosystems, the APIs, and hopefully we're going to be talking about that as well. But yes, as you said, we see this uptake on the business-to-business side. Enterprise is very strong. I think this is where really the edge deployment and edge utilization happens. I would say people think or tend to think that edge is about low latency. It's not selling the low latency, to be honest. It's to sell together the business outcome, how we can help the businesses to run their operations. So it's not always about that low latency promise. It's about the connectivity, about security, about fact that we can have data and AI services at the same location. So that's where this is important. From our perspective, we have to deliver obviously a platform to support this kind of services. And for that, when we talk about the AI, everybody is automatically thinking about the GPUs, but it's not really about that. You don't really have to have the GPUs to run this kind of workloads at the edge. It was mentioned here, you mentioned about video.
Computer vision.
Computer vision. Yeah. CPUs are working very well in this space. There is a lot of things about object detection. So it's not really about language models at this stage. I would say traditional, smaller, application, AI applications where those the platform can support. And what is very important to see is that the platform can be flexible. It's open, and so you can run different type of software on that. It's software defined, which is critical for the enterprise solutions because they have a different approaches. They team up with different system integrators. Those system integrators have to deploy the software and manage that software efficiently, and they cannot have the solutions for different platforms. So the openness of the platform is very critical in that space.
So, Fahim, you mentioned earlier on that at the moment, whatever the question is, AI is the answer. And obviously, we're talking here about how the network edge might be reworked for the AI era, if you want to call it that. But if we just step back a little bit for a moment and look at, in the introductory comments, it made it sound like, the edge has been built and then has been fallow, which is maybe a bit harsh. So can we talk about what evidence there is for edge business cases that have been around for 10 years? Because I think it's about 10 years ago, everybody wanted to talk about edge. Everybody wanted to talk about low latency. People were starting to get excited about things around, connected cars and robotics, et cetera, et cetera. But how did that transpire? Is there any evidence that those original edge use cases actually became achievable and revenue generating? And where are we sort of, right now? Asif, we can start with that.
I think you have to look at it from different aspect, right? So if you talk about the telco network edge, there's always been networking applications and security applications that have already existed within that. So we've provided security services from there, whether it's inspection services, whether you are encrypting, etc. Those kinds of fundamental things have always been available. Then we talk about the enterprise edge, right? Which is different because that then connects into the network edge. And that's where we're talking about more of the compute that we're looking at, computer vision. Because look, our customers, we had a point in time, and I know you mustn't know about this, Fahim, but at the end of the day, we had so many different offices and so many different branches and loads of infrastructure everywhere, right? And we went through this phase of, oh, the cloud is the be-all and end-all. So we're just going to dump everything into this cloud, right? And there's nothing at the customer's enterprise. I don't want to deploy anything anymore. But now they've realized, hold on a minute, we're moving back into a distributed model. It was purely because to manage all of that infrastructure over those different sites was difficult. But now we've got orchestration, et cetera. And now we've got the kind of cases where it's not about just latency, but applying a level of compute at that edge, especially on the factory floor, right? In which you can then turn around and carry out activities without having to rely on a connection, right? Because some of these factories, if a connection goes down and that factory goes down, you could lose millions. So what it is these factories are self-contained. They have to have their own compute. They have to have the convergence, et cetera, for them to continuously function. And just if anything goes down from the network perspective, they can still continue and create their products. So we've got to look at it like that. There's always been those cases. We've had the cases, in particular in our industry, in our company, as enterprise, is we've had always security use cases. We've always had VPN capabilities, inspection capabilities, secure web capabilities to block threats, etc. But that's evolving now. I think what you're going to start to see from that edge is the deployment of more essentially specialized DPUs, data processing units, which can accelerate encryption. And we're moving into the world of obviously, we talk about quantum, essentially the threat from quantum, right? And how new algorithms are being developed. And essentially to run encryption, you do have to have accelerators, right? To be able to do stuff at pace. So those things are coming up as well.
Well, maybe we can talk about that now and how, I mean, quantum's a great example, so let's include that in the conversation here. But how is the increasing use of AI and AI-enabled use cases, inferencing, etc., how is that impacting edge business cases right now and in the next few years? And does this require a rethink of edge architectures, or is what we have in place a good starting point for where we can go now? Fahim, if we can start with you.
Yeah. So I think that we are currently in the place whereby enterprises are still finding their way with AI. Like I said earlier, it doesn't matter the question, the answer is AI. And I think we're kind of slowly drifting away from that and starting to drift to, okay, why AI? And for the most part, and I'm not a massive expert on this subject, I'll just kind of preface this with that, is, in terms of the architectures that we have deployed, we are actually in a relatively good place with regards to actually running the sorts of applications we need to run at those locations. For example, inference is not a GPU-heavy activity. It's actually a CPU-heavy activity. And what we have deployed at the edge, a ton of CPUs already. So I think that we're actually in a relatively good place with regards to that. The challenge that we have at the moment is, I think you asked a really interesting question in terms of, have we actually met the business cases from the last 10 years? And I would say no, with the exception of the area of security. Security is probably the only area where we have met some of the business cases, and we're actually generating a decent amount of revenue around at the moment. I think that the challenge that we've had over the last 10 years have really been inside operators, because, and I think there was a comment made yesterday with regards to the fact that, there was an insinuation, let's call it that, which was challenged in the questions that basically suggested that edge was relatively easy to do. Unfortunately, it is not. And I think the operators are now starting to get a handle on actually how to utilize that and how to drive the agility that it was meant to drive. Now, the interesting thing is, just as we're getting a handle on that, up pops AI, which basically has a whole series of other requirements that we still have to build expertise around, and enterprises themselves actually have to build expertise around. But there certainly are opportunities whereby we can utilize that infrastructure to deliver new services that we've not been able to deliver in the past. But we just have to be mindful in terms of how we do that.
Asif, maybe you can expand on what you mentioned there in terms of DPUs and what that might enable.
So DPUs, again, it's down to security applications, and essentially, because with our edge, and naturally, we're not a cloud provider, right? So we don't have 50 or 100 racks sitting in a telco POP, right? We need density, right? And these DPUs will help accelerate that, because what they do is they inspect at the hardware level and accelerate essentially security applications and networking applications, to say that. When it comes to reworking that edge, does it really need to be reworked? I mean, ultimately, as we've said, the compute is there. Now, if I do really want to connect into essentially a GPU to do some level of, learning, etc., and so forth, then you've got GPU as a service type capabilities that you're looking at. We're not saying that they'll be deploying everywhere, but you're starting to see these farms being developed. So all you do is essentially connect your edge compute to essentially those given farms to be able to carry out the activity.
Yeah.
That then saves you turning around and throwing out whatever you've deployed and start deploying NVIDIA CPU, GPUs on different hardware. So it's just a matter of what are those cases and can we connect them in? But I don't think it requires a whole heap of rework, essentially. It's a matter of open standards and integrating with them and having a partner ecosystem. It's not about us telcos pretending to be, a cloud. We're not a cloud player. Our job is to turn around and connect the clouds, right? And connect our customers into those clouds in a secure manner. And we can do so with that thin layer of edge compute. So it's a collaborative manner. We're not interested in competing. We're interested in collaborating and essentially working with our partners together. And the key thing is how does that orchestrate from end to end? From when you see drone swarms that are out there being controlled into the edge, and that connectivity from the last mile into the middle mile, applying the security, and then also connecting it into the customer's enterprise cloud in which they can consume those insights. That whole thing is not easy to orchestrate. And I think we're in the best position to be able to orchestrate that end-to-end with our partners, essentially, and get it to work. Managed services is key. Our customers, some of them, they'll say, we want managed services, it needs to be fully managed, but I want to be able to make changes as well at the same time. You see that. But they want it to all work end to end, and they need a partner to do that. If they have to do that themselves, it can be complicated, but we have the capability to do that end to end.
Mm-hmm. There are also, and it's a shame, and people looking at the agenda might say, wasn't there going to be a fourth person on this panel? And there was from Vodafone 3, and that was going to bring a sort of an extra perspective to the panel. But I still want to ask the question, because you mentioned GPU as a service, and that is actually something that is being invested in and being developed by some telecom operators. Now, I'm not going to say, hey, why aren't you guys doing it, if you're not, but what do you think of that as a model? Because, we really are here talking about how do operators transform edge infrastructure into profit-generating platforms, and this is clearly seen as an opportunity, and very often it's linked to this topic which we talked about yesterday of sovereignty, and which is cropping up in a whole load of conversations about a lot of different things. So is there an opportunity for network operators to add to or rethink their edge capabilities to introduce whether it's GPUs, DPUs, or other infrastructure, to be able to develop this compute as a service and drive revenues from it?
In my opinion, and I think there's a lot of money been spent already. Let's think about it, right? Is that our game? Is that where telcos want to be? I would say that we would partner, if anything, right?
Okay.
With these types of capabilities. I mean, a telco can go out and actually turn around and stack his own GPUs and provide a GPU as a service at considerable of cost compared to what we've paid now on just edge compute. That thing is not cheap, right? So I do think that most telco operators are probably looking at partnering, right? For those that are actually building their own now, good luck to them, because it's going to be an expensive endeavor. If you look at what the cloud players are doing now, and all of the compute and GPUs that are being built out in all of these data centers, it's not no small feat, right? And it's very expensive. I'm saying that we as a telco, our job is to orchestrate. Our focus is the core, is the network, right? We've always been able to provide security over that network and being able to sell a lot of security. But if we start turning around and building GPU farms and then start using the mentality of, don't worry, we'll build it and they'll come, I'm afraid, in my opinion, that's the wrong way to go. But to partner with them is very important. Because once those cases manifest, you can't force your customers to turn around and say, oh, this is going to work. You know, it's not that killer application scenario. It's not going to happen, right? But as customers start reworking their applications, reworking their manufacturing plants, then we can then look at, okay, do we need those capabilities? And we can connect into those capabilities for inferencing, et cetera, and so forth, rather than essentially trying to build them out, et cetera.
Okay. Slawek, do you see a potential for compute as a service linked to perhaps to the sovereign services opportunity?
Absolutely. And as Asif said, you know, the compute as a service, GPU as a service, CPU as a service, edge as a service, or AI as a service is very, very important. There's a service here, right? And the infrastructure doesn't really generate the revenue alone, right? I mean, you can spend a lot of money on infrastructure, but then so what? If you don't have a product that sells to the customer, then you don't gain anything, right?
Yeah,
you spend the money, and that's where that first statement was here, that the telco spent $40 billion and 20% of utilization. What does this tell? Is it something that was mismanaged, was not forecasted properly, or didn't really think about like where I'm going to be doing the infrastructure, but I'm not thinking about the services? I think the services is the key here. The use case is the key here. And I think the telcos, what they ought to do is to listen to the customers, what the customers they need to have. If you don't do that, then the customers are not going to be cooperating with you, right? Because if you deploy something that doesn't fit the customer need, they will not use this, right? So this is the key here, that the telcos have to listen to the customers. They have to think, what is the challenge for the customers to actually use that infrastructure?
Exactly.
Yeah. And
the challenge could be the ecosystem. It could be APIs. It could be some other things, right? So it's not just one way. It's really collaborating with the customers, understanding their business, the business needs, and talking to the customers like how they can actually use that infrastructure, educate them about that. You know, we do that a lot, and showcase that it can be done. I think I'm also co-chairing at the Telco Infra project, which is one of the partner here. And we have a Telco AI project group. And so what we're trying to do is we're looking at that from the network AI perspective and AI for network. So both ways, how to monetize and how to use AI for network benefits. And I think what we find out is actually even telcos, but also the customers, they need to have some sort of also guidelines, the blueprints. And I think the blueprints here can help also how you can monetize the network and edge infrastructure. So the blueprints would be basically the template, the proven template that can be utilized, can be adopted as well, change a little bit, but it's basically a guideline that this is how you can use this infrastructure, this software, and for example, for this kind of use cases.
Yep.
And it can be very easy to be implemented. It should be proven. It should be tested, and time to market is going to be very fast. So you monetize this very quickly because you have something that you can rely on. It has provided you a test experience already that was done somewhere else. You don't have to do this POC that we talked about before. You don't have to do those POCs again, right? It has been proven, right? So you can go and apply this and get a revenue as fast as you can.
Okay. And obviously, one size does not fit all here. What might work in Norway and Switzerland and Canada, might just be no business case for it in a lot of other territories. Fahim, are you seeing different, customer requirements in terms of as a service, in different geographies? Is this and around sovereignty as well?
So sovereignty is obviously a massive issue in Europe at the moment, or not a massive issue, a massive conversation.
Big conversation
in Europe at the moment. So there is a lot of requirements coming out in that space within that geography right now. My expectation is they're just ahead of everybody else in that respect. The conversations will happen elsewhere as well. There was a comment made yesterday. I think Colin made it in the fact that there isn't. Colin from BT made the comment about the fact there isn't a Dacia definition of what sovereign actually means. So everyone's kind of making it up as they go along at the moment. But certainly sovereignty is a really, really important topic. Certainly what we're seeing is technological trends, for example, are taken up by different geographies in the world at different rates. For example, Southeast Asia is very much an area which has taken on consumption services a lot quicker than Europe has or the UK has, because they're a lot more experimental, a lot more willing to play with that sort of stuff as well. I mean, just going back to your previous question, I was a decade ago or so, showing my age a little bit here, every telco wanted to be a cloud provider, and everybody built a cloud. And frankly, to be quite honest, because it was just infrastructure at the end of the day, wasn't it? It's what we've done as our bread and butter for absolutely forever. But the real challenge was a lot of operators needed to exit that market because they were competing against large-scale cloud providers who had a completely different sort of operating model, whole different business model in terms of actually how they actually attack that problem space. I agreed with Asif to a degree. Sorry, Asif, but just in the fact that partnership is really, really important. The other element that I find really, really interesting is this whole idea that if as an industry we want to enable our edge for consumption for whichever use cases, whether it's AI-based use cases or other use cases, openness starts to become a really, really important topic, and portability becomes a really, really important topic. We can see, although it's pretty nascent, the excitement around the Kamara project is the fact that everybody implements the same APIs, which means as an application developer, I can build my stuff once and import that across operators. If we are to succeed in actually making the edge attractive to our enterprise customers, we have to operate in very much the same way. If a customer churns away from Verizon towards Colt, Hopefully there'll be a lot of those. But if they decide to churn and they've built an application that runs on Verizon's edge infrastructure, they need the ability to be able to port it over to Colt's edge infrastructure without doing a lot of work.
Yeah.
And unless we're able to achieve that as an industry, get that level of standardization in terms of APIs, in terms of consumption and the such like, I don't think it's worth the energy of actually trying to put, edge infrastructure for consumption in place in all these different locations, especially expensive edge infrastructure, which like GPU as a service.
Okay. So I'm going to come to the audience in a minute to see if there's any questions, but the topic of partnerships has been mentioned here, and just want to. There's this kind of debate that goes on. If the network operators just partner, whether it's with hyperscalers or other infrastructure companies, then they're basically giving away the value potentially of services and only becoming the connectivity providers. What is the nature of partnerships in terms of the edge potential for network operators? Are the hyperscalers a competitive threat? Are they going to be great partners because they don't perhaps have the relationship and trust, turned up a hell of a lot yesterday in a lot of conversations here at this event, that the telcos are trusted to deliver a lot of services. So what's the partnership dynamic as AI-enabled services come in, robotics, etc.? What is the nature of partnerships that could help service providers to generate more revenues without ceding control or ceding the customer engagement?
It's a good question. Look, we've been working with AWS and our cloud partners for a long time. We're using AWS Lightwave, etc., and edge technologies. We're the critical piece where we provide the connectivity, and I think what Colin mentioned also that without our connectivity, you pretty much have nothing, right? The challenge is everybody's just said, look, it's a commodity-based service. They're reliant on it. It's just that when it fails, they start making a noise, but they're so reliant on it. I think for us, again, it's not about ceding away control, because we own, when we turn around, and in particular with Verizon Enterprise, right? And we look at large customers and large solutions, we're the guys who bring it all together, right? We may use AWS, we may use different partners, but we're the guys who are orchestrating that end-to-end and providing essentially a managed service around that. And I think that's where our focus should be, is to provide that connectivity. And because we connect from far edge to near edge to enterprise edge into our network edge and into the middle mile, and we're the guys who see everything, and we're the guys who can actually orchestrate that. Customers don't want to run around and, I've got a problem here, I need to go over here. In some cases, they want that fully managed service, and they just want to be able to say, look, it works, and we manage that headache for them.
Okay. So would you say that the industry has reached a sort of a level playing field, or an understanding between the different ecosystem partners about how end customers can have their services and demands best met?
I wouldn't say that it's the complete. I think everybody's got their own opinions in that, and there's still a little time to solidify that. But ultimately, our customers will look at us and think, you're a telco. We're a technology company, right? And essentially, we've been technology for a while, and we've spoken about that, right? You're not quick enough. You're not like the cloud, right? Essentially, we're regulated. We've got to think about doing things.
Sure.
So our customers see us that. But when we look at enterprise solutions, we're B2B, essentially. Our job is to look at the whole end-to-end stack. Other operators will work in different ways. It depends on what space they work in, right? But we will go as far as deploying edge technologies, working with our partners and providing a managed service around that. But when it comes to turning around and trying to deploy our own compute, etc., and although we have our own, right? We're not saying that we don't deal with cloud. We have our own cloud, but that's for internal use and internal consumption, because naturally we needed it for 5G, etc. I'm talking about essentially offering compute to the customer through service. And service is really important. It's not about the technology on its own. It's not about I've deployed a box there and what does it cost. It's about the end-to-end service. The customer wants an end-to-end SLA, a service level objective to be met across that whole infrastructure. And that's where I think we can turn around and do a good job there.
Okay. And Slawek, a quick comment on the ecosystem before we come to the audience. Is there a new ecosystem play here around the edge? Because as the AI era emerges, new partnerships to be brokered?
Yeah, I think, from the software perspective, I like to, that you guys mentioned here before, the aspect of portability of the applications. I mean, the ecosystem is all about that. Look at what success has the hyperscalers. If you develop an application, let's say on AWS or Google or so on, those applications, I can launch that application in US, I can launch that application in Europe. It's portable per se, right? I think that's what is very strong here. Ecosystem, building the ecosystem in telco is very important. And I think the partnering aspect, maybe with the hyperscalers is something that has to be really considered. Bringing the connectivity aspect into this. But I think also what I wanted to bring is the telcos, they have a lot of information, a lot of data. We talk about that can be used by even hyperscalers, that can be monetized. The auto industry, knowing where the congestion is, the network in the RAN system, if you have a connectivity with the cars, it's very important. That insight is actually on telco. Mm-hmm. The telco companies, the operators, they have so much information that they can leverage here that I think they have to just find a way how to use this, how to partner and use that information.
And again, that's again on partnerships, right? V2X, right? We're working with different car manufacturers, etc., on that edge capability on autonomous cars. I'm not saying that, we're generating revenue overnight, but it's slow, and you're going to start to see a lot more of it. Sovereignty plays a major part in that, though, because it depends on where you sold your car, within the US, in Europe.
Yes, we heard about a lot of these issues yesterday afternoon. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot about that, but yeah.
Okay. Tony, I think we've got time for one quick question. If there's a hand up in the audience for our panel.
Yes, there is.
Is it? Okay.
There's two hands up.
Okay. So
You two can argue amongst yourselves.
we haven't got an awful lot of time, so if there's one
I'm just wondering
question.
why the word neo-cloud is not being used. You keep talking about hyperscalers. They're very last century, surely, last decade. And many telcos have got their little pet neo-cloud, or maybe the neo-clouds have got pet telcos, and we've had no discussion of that. And they're the ones who are doing AI, who need edge.
Yes, that's. I don't really know how to answer that, and I don't think in 1 minute that we're going to get to that. It's an interesting.
Can I quickly comment on?
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, as far from a telco point of view, a cloud is a cloud. A partner cloud is a partner cloud. There is differences in scale, differences in capability, but when we're talking about clouds, it's equally applicable to neo clouds as much as it is to hyperscale clouds.
Label aside, right? Yeah, it's the same type of technology.
Okay. I get the sense that Camille might be looking for a conversation during the lunchtime break on that then. And if anybody from the hyperscalers here might be hunting you out, Camille, for a conversation, I don't know. But Okay, look, we have reached the end of the time for this particular panel, so we need to end it there because we have a next session about to start. So as we get our next set of experts to the stage, let's give a round of applause for our panelists here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, guys. Well done.